Mademoiselle Chanel, 2 premières.
That's all, Mademoiselle Chanel, deux premières. I hope I look all right. The sound of the clap reminds me of a man I saw slap a woman in the street. She deserved it. I said to myself, if she doesn't watch it, she's going to get a good slap. And she did.
À 88 ans, Gabrielle Chanel, surnommée Coco,
At the age of 88, Gabrielle Chanel, nicknamed Coco,
the
the grande dame of French fashion, was a sprightly old woman. But after her death on January 10, 1971, her couture house started to collapse.
Karl Lagerfeld, arrivé il y a 10 ans, l'a transformée, avec un style que n'aurait peut-être pas aimé Mademoiselle.
Karl Lagerfeld, who replaced her 10 years later, transformed it with innovations that Mademoiselle Chanel might not have liked, but he retained what is acknowledged to be the Chanel style. France has always led the way in women's fashion. Several days before the presentation of the Spring '91 collection, the atmosphere in the studio is not as tense as in Mademoiselle Chanel's heyday. A perpetually anxious perfectionist, she would unstitch and redo her designs up to the last minute. Things weren't done in the same way before World War II. Not all the models were made. The headdress designer presented the cloth and they chose from it. The method was very different. The fashion designers even bought designs from outside people. And to work the way Coco did, and the way people worked in the 50s, that hadn't existed before. Before, it was a huge undertaking because one should remember that a couture dress, relatively speaking, did not cost more than a luxury ready to wear today. On Saturday, January 9th, 1971, things were at fever pitch in the same atelier. All the employees anxiously awaited the arrival of Coco Chanel. Mademoiselle, who lived at the Ritz, was giving last-minute changes to her closest collaborator. I arrived at the Ritz, and she was almost ready. I sat down beside her as she put on her makeup. I explained what was planned for the day. During the shows, she daydreamed a lot. She was like a sleepwalker. She didn't know how to draw, but she would take bed covers, clothes, and cut patterns out of them. Very often, she would cut patterns out of bed sheets. When I'd get there, she would show me what she'd done during the night, and she'd try to explain what she wanted, so that I could put it on paper for her. Then, as usual, there was pandemonium at the boutique on the Rue Cambon. The 2 women arrived around noon. Everyone ran to hide because we were afraid. When Mademoiselle arrived, we were thinking, my God, what's she going to say today? So we all steered clear of the main staircase. I'd warned everyone when Mademoiselle was arriving, and we'd spray the staircase with perfume for her arrival. With which perfume? Mademoiselle Chanel used only number 5, of course. What's the most difficult thing in your profession?
Le 5, vous demandez. Mademoiselle Chanel n'a toujours pris que le 5, c'est évident.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a de plus difficile dans votre métier?
To allow a woman to move comfortably, not to feel disguised, not to change her attitude. Well, that's very difficult, and I think that's my gift. I think that I have it.
Pas changer d'attitude, de manière d'être, selon la robe dans laquelle on les a fourrés, c'est très difficile. Et ça, je crois que c'est le don que je possède.
On the last Saturday of her life, she went into the vast showroom to see the new models that she had designed. Chanel believed in her own style.
Chanel croyait à sa mode. Et c'est très troublant de comprendre que cette silhouette qu'elle a imposée au monde, c'était la sienne.
Chanel believed in her own style, which she imposed on the world, was in fact her own slenderness. These were her weapons, which she seduced the world with. But people liked it. And up to the last minute, she applied herself to creating it for women.
Chanel était quelqu'un de très solitaire à la fin de sa vie et finalement le samedi et le dimanche, elle supportait mal de rester seule.
Mademoiselle Chanel was a very solitary person at the end of her life, and so on weekends, she didn't like being alone. Friends went to see her, but most of the time she was alone. She hated being alone. It didn't matter if lunch was interesting or gloomy. Every day was different. But then there was the famous evening ceremony at the exit through the door before going down the stairs. How many times people had to stand there for hours talking with her between those 2 doors before she finally left. She was so afraid of solitude that she became attached to a man 50 years her junior, François Morone. I listened to her talk. The first time, it lasted from 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon until 9 that evening, non-stop.
Sans arrêt.
Une femme qui n'est pas aimée est une femme nulle, et puis après c'est tout. À quelque âge qu'elle est.
A woman who is not loved is nothing, and that's that, no matter how old she is, young, old, mother, mistress, whatever. A woman who is not loved is a lost woman.
Qui à un certain moment s'est dégradée et est passée vers le sentiment amoureux à deux reprises. Une fois
We had a platonic friendship. On 2 occasions, it deteriorated into feelings of love on her part. Once in the car, and I got out of the car very quickly. Another time in Lausanne, I was sitting at a table where, in front of other people, she asked me to elope with her. Here again, I left immediately. Yes, she had passionate relationships with everyone who was close to her, not just with me. She was someone who went through life like a tornado. And her relationships were always that way, always extreme, as much in her work as in her daily life. Very, very passionate relationships.
La relation était toujours ainsi, c'était toujours extrême. C'était aussi bien quand elle travaillait que quand elle vivait son quotidien entre les moments de travail et les moments de création. C'était toujours des relations très, très passionnées.
Autoritaire, abusive, cette
Authoritarian,
géniale vieille
abusive,
demoiselle
this old
Aline,
woman of
grande
genius, high
prêtresse
priestess
de la
of
haute
French
couture
haute
française,
couture,
n'avait plus
had
guère
only a
d'amis
few
à
friends
l'approche
left
de
in
ces
her
derniers
last
jours.
years.
Ils
They
se
could be
comptaient
counted on the
sur les
fingers
doigts
of
de la
one
main,
hand. Her
ce qui n'était pas
detractors
le
were
cas de
numerous.
ses détracteurs.
Je crois qu'elle était tellement méchante qu'elle était fâchée avec tous ses amis et qu'elle s'est retrouvée toute seule. Et
I think she
ça,
was
ça
a
arrive à
mean
tout le monde, mais
person,
c'est pas-
that
il y a
she
pas
could
que
be
les
horrible
créatures
to
qui
all
peuvent
her
être tout seules.
friends,
Ça, c'est une
and
question
that
de
she ended up
personnalité
very
plus que
much
de
alone.
métier.
But that
Le
happens
métier
to
a bon dos
everyone,
de dire
not
que c'est
just
le
to
métier.
fashion
Moi, je pense que
designers.
c'est une simple
It's more a
question de
question of
personnalité.
personality than a
Il y a
profession.
d'autres cas
You know,
regardez,
it's
les femmes
easy
comme
for the
Madeleine Dietrich,
fashion
elle est très
world
seule
to
aussi,
say
mais
that
si
it's
c'est des gens qui
because
étaient
of the
vraiment méchants avec
profession.
leurs amis, qu'à la fin, ils se
But I
retrouvent
think
tout
it's a
seuls, ça, on va
simple
pas pleurer
question of
là-dessus, hein.
personality. Look at other
Terrible coup de
examples.
patte de
Marlena
celui qui a
Dietrich was
repris la
very
griffe
much alone
Chanel,
as
mais
well.
ceux qui
But if
travaillaient
people
avec
who are
elle
mean to their
jusqu'à son
friends
dernier
end up
jour
all alone,
ne le
we're not going to
désavouent
cry
pas.
over
Le
them, are
talent
we? Be a
n'excuse pas
cruel
la
but
tyrannie que
realistic
Coco Chanel
analysis
exerçait à
coming from the
l'encontre de
man
ses
who inherited the
subordonnés,
Chanel
et
mantle.
cela
But
jusqu'à
those
sa
who
dernière
worked with her
heure.
up to the end do not refute it. Talent does not excuse the tyranny which Coco Chanel exerted over her subordinates up to the very last days. The day before, she'd gone through the same old song and dance about coming to work. We'd had it up to here with her and said, "No, we're not coming tomorrow." Oh, she would be so furious when we stood up to her like that. We never thought that she'd be dead the next day. We had known we would have gone to work and that might have saved her life, she'd say.
Elle me disait, regardez-moi ça, elles ne veulent pas travailler. Ces ouvrières, on n'aura
Really
jamais-
now,
on n'aura
they
jamais
don't want to
fini.
work.
Elles-
The
elles
workers
passeront
never
travailler
stopped
toujours
working
deux
because we
dimanches
always
et-
worked
et
the
deux
2
samedis
weekends
avec
before the
les collections.
collections, not to
Sans
mention
compter
that we'd
les
stay
nuits
late
qui
at
restent
night
le
to
soir
present the new
pour
models.
présenter les
So
modèles, les
Mademoiselle
mannequins.
would say,
Et le samedi,
"I have to
c'est
make
pour que je
Manon
fasse pleurer
cry.
Manon.
She has
Qu'elle
to bathe
arrose-
the
qu'elle
collection
arrose
with
la
her tears."
collection.
It was a superstition with her.
Et-
So I had a
C'était
friend
une
who would say to
superstition
me,
pour elle,
"Pinch
pour
yourself,
chacun.
think of something,
Une amie qui me
cry,
disait,
so she'll be
Pince-toi,
happy."
pense à quelque
Sometimes
chose.
I managed
Pleure,
to
elle va être
cry,
contente.
but other times I didn't even need
Elle
to
va être
force
contente, la
myself
collection va être
because I thought
arrosée.
that the model I was presenting was
Alors,
good, and she'd tear the stitches out.
Mais des fois, j'avais pas besoin de
and
me
ask
forcer
for me
parce
to
que
have it ready
moi,
for
je
the
trouvais que
next
le modèle
day.
était bien que je présentais sur le mannequin. Et ben, elle me le décousait. Et elle me dit, puis je veux que ça soit prêt pour le lendemain.
Dimanche 13h, sa dernière amie la rejoint.
On Sunday at 1 p.m., one of her last friends went to see her.
Le jour qu'elle détestait parce qu'elle ne pouvait pas travailler un dimanche. Et le dernier dimanche, ça a été extraordinaire parce que
I spent
elle était si
Sundays with her.
longue à s'habiller.
It was the day she was alone, the day that she hated because she couldn't go in and work that day. And that last Sunday, it was extraordinary because she took so long to get dressed. It was as if she were taking the times that she'd never taken before. And then we went downstairs to the Ritz to have lunch around 2:30, and she talked about her mother. She said, "I won't be able to resist making a dress with a bustle like the kind my mother wore." And then we went to the racetrack. Well, that was obviously the kind of promenade she'd done in her youth. And in fact, when we got back to the Ritz, she said, "You see, in the past, there was the smell of horses and men who loved me. I couldn't seem to reassure her. We talked, and she had an almost physical need for presence."
Nous communiquions, nous parlions. Et elle avait un besoin presque physique de présence. Elle ne pouvait pas être quittée. Nous rentrons, je la vois disparaître dans la porte.
I can still see her as I said goodbye at the entrance to the Ritz. It was the end of the afternoon, and she was going to have her dinner brought to her on a tray. And the next day, Monday, she was going to be back at work on her collection. And her final words to me were, "Come see me at the Rue Cambon at the end of the afternoon. I'll be working."
En fin d'après-midi, seule dans sa chambre, Coco Chanel se sent mal. Elle téléphone à Lilou Marquand.
At the end of the afternoon, alone in her hotel room, Coco Chanel does not feel well. She calls Lilou Marquand. Around 6 p.m., she called me and said, "I told you I wasn't feeling well, but now you really must come because I'm really not feeling well at all. I think I'm dying." I told her voice sounded very good for somebody who was about to die. I didn't believe her at all. I thought she was putting on her usual show. She was always telling me she was about to die when she wanted me to come and see her. I get so busy with what I'm doing that I become totally exhausted. I think that I'll have a collection ready in 4 or 5 days. It kills me.
Je suis allée vers 6h30 et tout de suite été
Went to see her around 6:30 p.m. and I was immediately frightened by her paleness and the fact that the window was wide open. It was January, it was freezing outside, and she was baked and swept. One morning she said to me at the Ritz, "You know, I'd like to die like de Gaulle." She died the same way de Gaulle did. So when I arrived, it was really the end, and I took her hand and did what she asked me to do.
Tous ceux qui l'approchaient on pensait qu'elle était immortelle, que ça durerait.
Everyone who got to know her thought she was immortal, that she'd lived to be over 100. So it was quite a shock. When I saw her, I immediately thought, this is not possible.
Que c'était pas possible.
Et nous avait dit, ce qu'il faudra, c'est que ce jour-là, dès que je serai morte, il faudra que vous me
She always told us, the day I die, you and Francois, make sure that I am elegant, and then carefully put me in the Cadillac between the two of you with a hat over my eyes. When you get to the border, say that the old lady is sleeping and show my passport, and say that I'm not to be disturbed, and then you quietly bury me in Lausanne without saying anything to anyone.
Et vous montrerez mon passeport en disant qu'il ne faut pas me déranger, et vous allez m'enterrer tous les deux.
But one does not bury the symbol of French elegance hastily. Coco Chanel, who died in solitude, was given a state funeral. At the Madeleine, her few friends, her workers, and the two Paris came to pay their respects to the woman who had found happiness only in her work.
Tout Paris se presseront pour rendre hommage à celle qui n'aura jamais trouvé le bonheur ailleurs que dans son travail.
Quand, comme moi, on est seul dans la vie, facilement, si on ne faisait pas très attention, tout deviendrait...
When you're alone in life, like I am, if you don't watch out, everything very easily becomes absolutely disgusting, unbearable. A woman without a husband is a woman to be pitied, yes. She cannot see life as it really is. She's living a lie.
C'est pas vrai.